Hello, good morning. This is Dr. Iftikhar Ahmed Ansari from Department of Political Science, Aligarh Muslim University. And today I will be talking about contemporary approaches. And in contemporary approaches, basically I will be discussing about different modes of political analysis. Now, contemporary politics, as such, I mean, if we talk about the approaches of contemporary politics, it has evolved a number of political analysis and their different models. Of these, the following are some of these important chosen one, like system analysis, structural function analysis, communication theory, decision-making analysis. Now, these models are associated with liberal view of politics. Finally, we do have Marxist analysis. It may be added to this list, though it may lead to very different result. Now, political analysis is the product of empirical scientific orientation in the study of politics, and in the classical tradition, Aristotle's classification of government, and Machiavelli's cost-benefit analysis of different techniques of leadership may be cited as earlier and rudimentary attempts of political analysis. However, political analysis in the real sense has flourished only in modern times, particularly with the adoption of scientific method in the study of politics. Now, the question very first which arises is, what is political analysis? Now, political analysis involves several steps. Now, we start with determining the nature of politics. David Easton's concept of politics as authoritative allocation of values will serve as a suitable example. Politics is now everywhere recognized as a process which involves a set of interactions among its components. To proceed in the direction of political analysis, we must identify these components. Now, this will guide us to the relevant data which should be chosen for a proper understanding of politics. But how are these data interrelated? This will depend on our concept of pattern of interaction of components of political process. So, the next step is to arrange our data according to the interrelationship as conceived by us, so as to yield an explanation. Now, these two steps, that is determining the relevant data and evolving their suitable arrangement for yielding an explanation, that constitutes a model of political analysis. So, I repeat, it's the determining the relevant data and evolving the suitable arrangement for yielding an explanation that constitute a model of political analysis. Now, since such a model is evolved at a conceptual level, it's possible to build several modes of and models of political analysis depending on our point of inquiry. Now, very first analysis is system analysis in this direction. Now, this is the pioneering model of political analysis. It conceives of politics in terms of a political system. Now, what is a system? As Roald Dahl has elucidated, that any collection of elements that interact in some way with one another can be considered a system. So, a galaxy, a football team, a legislature, a political party. For the purpose of analysis, the element of system should be looked at in an abstract way rather than as concrete way that we are talking about. Now, hence, elements of political system should not be seen as a group of individuals constituting a government or its organs, but as abstract elements in interacting with each other in the sphere of politics. So, a model of political system in this sense was first developed by David Easton in his approach to the analysis of political system, World Politics, 1957. Now, he is regarded to be the pioneer of political system analysis, and Easton defined politics as authoritative allocation of values, which broadly constitutes the political process. Now, this does not take place in a closed circuit. Its ends are connected with the social process. So, it is in this sense that political system has been described as an open system. In other words, allocation of values is made because they are corresponding and there are corresponding demands from the society or the environment. It becomes authoritative because it gets support from the environment. Now, the system theory can be understood in input-output function. In David Easton's terminology, political system receives inputs from the environment in the form of demands and support. It produces output in the form of policies and decisions. So, the outputs flow back into the environment through a feedback mechanism, giving rise to fresh demands, etc. So, Easton has characterized demands as the raw materials out of which finished products called decisions are manufactured. He has described supports as the energy in the form of actions or orientations enabling the political system to convert the demand into authoritative decisions and policies. Demands may arise from any source. It could be the people, the politicians, administrators, opinion makers, leaders, and so on, depending on the nature of the regime. So the extent of support is bound to vary depending on the expectations of the people from the political system. So variability of support is bound to affect the destinies of the political authorities, often called governments. So the regime, whether it is democratic, authoritarian, and the like, the political community, outputs are produced by the political system through special processes that ensure their acceptance as binding by the most members of society most of the time. Now, inputs are taken as demand and support. So Easton has also given an elaborate classification of demands. Now, what these demands are and what the supports are. So demands, he says, can be subclassified into 4 types. Demands for allocation of goods and services, such as wages, working conditions, educational opportunities, recreational facilities, roads, transports. Secondly, demands for regulation of behavior, such as provision of public safety, controls over markets, and rules pertaining to marriage, health, and sanitation. And third, demands for participation. Now, participation in the political system, such as the right to vote, to hold office, to petition government bodies, officials, and to form political association. And fourthly, demands for communication and information, such as affirmation of norms, the information regarding policy intent, display of majesty and the power of the political system in times of foreign threats as well as ceremonial occasions. So supports are also subclassified into 4 types. Now, first is material support. Now, material support could be in the form of payment of taxes and other levies, rendering services in public interest such as social work, military service. It could be, secondly, in the form of obedience to law and rules and regulations. And thirdly, it could be the participatory support, such as voting, then political discussion and other forms of political activity. And fourth could be paying attention to government communication and display of deference, that is respect to public authority and symbols and ceremonials. Now, we've talked about output. Output may be clubbed together as policies and decisions. A policy itself is a web of decisions. Short decisions are again subclassified into 4 categories. It could be in the form of extractions, which may take the form of attributes, taxes, and personal services. Secondly, it could be in the form of a regulation of behavior, which may cover a wide range of human activities. And thirdly, it could be in the form of output, could be in the form of allocation of distribution of goods and services, opportunities, honors, then some kind of a status and the like. And the fourth is the symbolic output, including affirmation of values, display of political symbols, communication of policy intent. Now, feedback is essentially a communication process which produces action in response to information about the state of the political system or some part of the system thereof and its environment to structures within the system in such a way that future actions of those structures is modified as a consequence to that feedback mechanism. So the result of such modification may in turn produce further modifications and so on. The feedback channel helps the political system in approaching its goal. It apprises the political system of the position of its goal, its own distance from attaining those goals, and the changes in this direction brought about by its own performance in response to the information coming from the feedback process. So the framework of the system itself has been found very useful for the comparative analysis of diverse political units, such as modernized as well as developing countries. It has also been extensively used for analysis of international political system. However, it has been criticized for its inability in the analysis of political power as well as in the analysis of mass political behavior, like voting. Now, with that, we move to the second approach in contemporary politics in the form of modes of analysis. Now, this approach was further developed by Gabriel Armand and G.B. Powell in Comparative Politics, a developmental approach in 1966. Now, this input-output analysis, which was given by David Easton earlier, Armand and his associates, they argued that political system, regardless of their type, they perform certain specific set of tasks if they remain in existence as a system in working order or in equilibrium. That is, an as an ongoing system. So these are functional, and there are functional requirements of the system. Now, with this assumption, they sought to modify the David Easton's model of political systems, suggesting that inputs and outputs, as recognized by Easton, can best be understood as functions and functional requisites of political system. They sought to redefine these inputs and outputs with a deeper understanding of political process and proceed to identify various structures corresponding to these functions. So in order to evolve a structural functional framework, they conceded that in various political systems, these functions may be performed by different kinds of political structures, and sometimes even by structures which are not overtly recognized as being political. So Aman and his associates, they discerned 4 input functions and 3 output functions that are performed by various structures. Now, input functions are political socialization and recruitment, then interest articulation, interest aggregation, then political communication, and output functions are rule making, rule application, and rule adjudication. Now, of these output functions correspond to conventional governmental functions, which are performed by formal governmental organizations like legislature, which is rule making, executive, that is rule application, and judiciary, that is rule adjudication. Aman has paid special attention to input functions which are performed by non-governmental structures or institutions. Although all structures are multifunctional, yet some structures are specially suited for specific functions. Now, political socialization and recruitment that we are talking about as one of the input functions is the process whereby an individual, he acquires attitudes and orientations towards political phenomena. It also implies the process whereby society transmits political norms and beliefs from one generation to the next. So recruitment stands for the process whereby political groups, they obtain members of various important roles in the political process, either in addition to the existing members or as a replacement for other members. Now, since political socialization prepares the individuals to assume various important roles in the social structures, it is instrumental to recruitment also. Now, family, school, and other primary groups are more suited to perform this function. Interest articulation implies processes whereby opinion, attitude, beliefs, preferences, etc. are converted into coherent demands on the political system. Now, this function may be performed by various structures, but interest groups are most suited to perform this function. Now, interest aggregation is a process whereby various divergent interests are collated and translated into concrete demands of a very large section of society, preferably appealing to all sections of society. So, policy proposals and programs of action, etc. Political parties are most suited to perform this function. Finally, political communication is a process whereby the components of a political system, such as individuals, groups, institutions, they transmit and receive information regarding the functioning of the political system. Mass media or the organizations controlling the medium of mass media are the most suited to perform this function. Now, to summarize what has been said in structural functional model of Aman and Powell, we find that it's a framework of political analysis which is particularly found useful for comparative politics. So, a developed political system is characterized by differentiation of structures for the performance of specific functions. And in less developed political system, functions of interest articulation, interest aggregation, interest communication might be performed by some structures which have not taken a definite shape. But in a developed system, growth of interest groups, political parties, mass media would be clearly discernible. Structural functional analysis has been criticized on various grounds. Finally, it is alleged that firstly, it is alleged that this form of analysis is primarily concerned with systems survival. Hence, it is ideologically inclined towards conservatism. Secondly, it is not suited to analyze power relation in society. And finally, the project's Western-type liberal democratic system as a standard for institution building in developing societies rather than encouraging them to build their own institutions according to their own genius and specific requirements is what this approach promotes. So in any case, structural functional analysis signifies a significant advancement in the sphere of political analysis. Now with that, we move to the third mode of political analysis in contemporary approaches, and we find the communication theory. Now, communication theory is known as a theory given by Carl Deitch in political science through one of his books, that is Nerves of Government, Models of Political Communication and Control in 1963. And he is the chief exponent of this approach. So Deitch sought to apply the concept of methods of modern information technology as well as the physiology of nervous system to an analysis of political system. Now, he particularly introduced the technique of cybernetics to the sphere of political analysis. Now, cybernetics is the study of operation of control and communication system. It deals both with biological system and man-made machinery. So, Deitch declares that his work was concerned less with the bones and muscles of the body politic than with the nerves, its channel of communication and decision. So, communication theory regards the function of communication as the center of all political activity. An analysis of communications flowing from and flowing into the political system would therefore be very helpful in description, classification, and analysis, and finally explanation of the important aspect of political life. So Deitch argued that it might be profitable to look upon government somewhat less as a problem of power and somewhat more as a problem of steering, that is directing the course of its activity, which is the main function of communication. He therefore regards political system as a network of communication channels. Now, it is largely a self-regulating and self-controlling system which involves its own processes and mechanisms for the acquisition, collection, transmission, selection, and the storage of information. The problem of communication may be studied in three contexts. First is communication within the political system, communication between political systems and its environment, and the communication between two or more political systems. Now, its analysis involves the study of several components. Now, these components, they include the structures which are meant for sending and receiving information, then the channels used for the purpose of communication, along with their capacities and the rates of utilization, which can be expressed in the form of their load or load capacity or the rate of flow or the amount of lag or gain, that is the delay or promptness in responding to the information that is received. And third, the processes of storage of information, and fourth, the feedback mechanism. And fifthly, the codes and languages applied for the purpose of communication. And lastly, the content of the messages transmitted, etc. To summarize this communication theory, we find that communication is by no means a smooth process, and we must be very careful in detecting distortions, because if distortions could not be corrected appropriately, lots of problems cannot be prevented, and it cannot be minimized. That is the main purpose of this communication theory, to minimize all distortions. So, as Charles Worth has further observed, that in order to correct the distortion, we must study the determinants of distortion. Hence, communication is a legitimate methodological segment of political science. And in political science, this approach is particularly useful for an analysis of the processes of bargaining, conflict resolution, decision-making, evaluation of policies, estimating the impact of publicity and propaganda, as well as the understanding of dynamics of international relations. Now, with that, we move to the fourth major analysis in contemporary approaches, that is decision-making analysis. Now, decision-making is a wider phenomena. An exercise of any form of authority involves decision-making, whether it is in the sphere of business, university administration, or family. In political science, however, we are concerned with those areas of decision-making which affect politics. In other words, here we are concerned with the process of arriving at public decisions. However, the scope of decision-making in political sphere itself is very wide. Decision-making analysis is concerned with analysis of political system, processes, and behavior in terms of their decision-making mechanism and its functionality. Now, it broadly involves some of these features, like first, identification of issues on which decisions are to be made. Secondly, the structures which are involved in decision-making. Thirdly, the actors involved in making decision. Now, this may involve study of personality or leadership as well. Then, fourth is the alternative course of action or options that were considered before making a choice, and those factors which are influencing the choices of decision maker, that is their range of preferences vis-a-vis utilities attached to each of these alternatives. And fifth, if there is any external factors, pressures or constraints which influence their decision. And then the outcome of the decision, including its political cost. So under normal circumstances, it is assumed that the decision makers are capable of rational calculation, that is cost-benefit analysis, and that they are fully conscious of their goals so that they select the most efficient and feasible means of attaining these goals. However, if there is any departure from this course, that is, if a decision is a product of routinized behavior or irrational attitude on the part of some actors, social psychological reasons thereof must be investigated and recorded. Now, if we try to analyze the patterns of decision making, so decision making analysis does not conform to a single pattern. It may follow one of the several prevalent models. Now, some important models which are followed is the models. First is dealing with identification of variables of stages involved in the decision making process, as used in the work of Richard Snyder and Harold Lasswell. Then there is a model based on analogies between the economic and political decision making involving notions of maximizing advantages from the decision, as used in the work of Anthony Downs and J.M. Buchanan and G. Tallock. And then the game theory itself, which involves the qualification of results of decision strategies in certain type of competitive situation, that is situation of conflict or bargaining, in which it is assumed that each player will seek his maximum advantage under condition of rationality. So decision-making analysis essentially follows interdisciplinary approach by drawing substantially on psychology, sociology, administrative theory, and organizational theory. Now with that, we move on to the next analysis and the final analysis and contemporary approaches among the mode of analysis which are available, which gives almost a different result because it's a Marxian in nature. Other four analyses that we have done were liberal in view. So Marxist analysis starts with the distinction between base, that is the substructure, and superstructure. Now this building-like metaphor, which is used to postulate that economic structure of society, which represents the base, is responsible for creating and transforming its social structure, including its legal and political structure, or religion and moral structure, now which represents the superstructure. Now this means that political system as part of superstructure is not autonomous, that it does not grow out of itself, but emerges on the foundation of economic structure of the society. Economic structure, or the mode of production itself, changes with the development of forces of production. Now that means the production and labor power. Now this would bring about corresponding changes in the political system and other aspects of the superstructure. Now since the political system is neither independent nor autonomous, so no useful purpose will be served by undertaking analysis of political system as such. Now further, Marxism says, particularly classical Marxism, it insists on an analysis of economic structure of society, historical stages of its development, and the corresponding class structure prevailing at each of these stages, which is reflected in relation of production, in order to understand the character of the political system. Now, at each stage of historical development, society is divided into two antagonistic classes. So, the owners of private property or the major means of production rise to the position of dominant class, whereas those living solely on their labor on terms dictated by the former, that is the dominant class, they become a dependent class. So as long as the major means of production constitute to be privately owned, the division of society into dominant and dependent classes cannot be eliminated, nor their class conflict can ever be resolved. So politics must always be traced back to its hidden basis, that is the class struggle. Now since politics arises from class struggle, it's historically a transient phenomenon. Different states are simply different forms of class domination. As Marx and Engels, they observed that political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing others. Communist Manifesto, 1848. Politics is the process through which antagonistic classes, they struggle to obtain retain, or influence state power. Thus, under capitalism, politics of the capitalist class involves their strategy for exploitation of the working class, while politics of the working class implies organizing themselves to overthrow the capitalist system. In a nutshell, Marxism speaks of 5 stages of historical development, including one prehistoric stage. Now, they finally conceive of a classless society. Now, it is hoped that once a genuine socialist system is established and there is no distortion in its working, common ownership of major means of production will eventually lead to abolition of classes, state, and political power will become redundant, and politics itself will disappear. Society will then enter the phase of communism. It will become classless and stateless society with authority willing to exercise without resorting to power, and administration will be carried on without the state machinery. Now, Marx, Engels, and Lenin argued that political systems should be compared and contrasted with reference to their respective class structures. Now, we should not be misled by the superficial similarities or differences. Under this approach, there is practically no scope for independent political analysis. However, neo-Marxists have realized that superstructure is by no means a weak structure entirely dependent on the base. In a capitalist system, especially, the superstructure could be so strong that they may serve to strengthen the base itself, or in other societies, weaken it. Hence, it needs independent analysis. So, Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist and forerunner of New Marxism, has particularly evolved a framework for the analysis of bourgeoisie state, that is, a state under a capitalist system, by identifying the structure of dominance therein. Now, with that, we come to the end of this talk today, which was based on contemporary approaches, and here we analyzed different modes of analysis available for analyzing the political phenomena. Thank you.